Greg Gianforte to our studio this morning. Governor Gianforte, thank you so much for being in here this morning.
My pleasure, Augusta.
And you're in town to talk about a change to Montana's tax law going into effect this January, specifically for veterans and military members. Tell us a little bit about the new law.
Well, this is Veterans Week, and I'm so proud of the work that Senator John Fuller did. We want to take care of our veterans. And so this new bill that I signed into law earlier this year exempts 50% of military pensions from state income tax. This is going to encourage veterans who have served our country to come and retire and go back to work here in Montana. So we're pretty pleased about that. We're going to have a number of veteran entrepreneurs at our event later today at Red Ox. They're going to talk about what this bill means to them and the impact it's going to have on their business.
Okay, and as we've all been following this morning, local voters casting ballots recently on lots of county mill levies in our area. Of course, property taxes and housing affordability top of mind right now across the state. Homeowners getting their property tax bills in the past week. Some, of course, seeing hundreds of dollars of increase due to home valuations spiking across the state. So these valuations are adding to a long-term shift in Montana, where homeowners are paying an increasingly large share of property taxes in the state. In 1994, residential property owners paid 38% of all property taxes. In 2022, they paid 52% of all property taxes across the state. The dramatic acceleration of housing values and taxable value in the state this year, it creates a different sort of scenario for voters now considering whether or not to approve local mill levies like we're seeing. EMS services in Laurel, the Parks Bond in Billings, the new firehouse in Miles City. And they're kind of not just choosing whether or not these improvements are necessary, they're having to choose whether or not they're going to be able to afford their housing and pay for often much needed community services. So this spring at the legislature, although there were some short-term property tax relief measures for homeowners, there were no long-term changes to the general set of our tax system. There were even some additions to this shift, like the business tax exemption. Do you have any long-term plans to promote kind of a shift from the burden of property taxes falling on residential homeowners versus other sorts of property?
Well, we did do permanent relief in this last legislative session, but I want to start, Augusta. Property taxes are too high. I mean, I think I hear from voters all the time and citizens of the state. We put $120 million into permanent tax relief. And on the business equipment tax, we backfilled that out of the general fund. So the counties were made whole. But the reality is that's why we prioritize these $675 checks to every Montana homeowner. That more than offsets what most people are going to see. But we still need permanent relief. And I'm looking forward to working with the legislature. Unfortunately, I didn't get those bills this last session. Hopefully over this interim, we can work to get them there. But people should know none of the property tax goes to the state. It's really a function of local spending and these voter approved mills. And that's driving up some of the fees. So we really have to look at local spending to get property taxes under control.
The $170 million permanent tax reduction that we saw this session, really, if you're making $80,000 a year, you're going to see about an $80 a year tax savings. And the $670 rebates, which cover generally the increases that people will see in the next 2 years, stop in the next 2 years. And that was a big one-time surplus. So long-term solutions will once again become necessary in 2 years when people see those bills increase. In past legislative sessions, lawmakers have adjusted the state tax equation that determines how much of a home's taxable, how much of a home's value is taxable, and that offsets big increases in property taxes and it neutralizes the impact to taxpayers. The legislature didn't choose to do that this session, so the state will make more money because of that. Why didn't the GOP-controlled legislature or your office take steps to reduce the taxable values of homes in Montana during the legislative session to prevent the large property tax increases that people are paying right now?
Well, we proposed $1,000 per homeowners. The legislature reduced that to $675. We had hoped to do more, and we need permanent relief. That's why we put $120 million into this area. But again, none of these dollars come to the state. It's a function of local spending, and we saw it in your report earlier with people rejecting a local mill levy. A lot of this is based on the decisions. I would just encourage folks, this $675 that they got this year more than offsets any increase most homeowners will see here in Yellowstone County and around the state. But we have to do permanent relief going into this next session, and there's a number of ideas on the table, and we'll be discussing them. I hope the legislature gets those bills to my desk.
You had a GOP-controlled legislature this session. Why didn't they come up with a solution when you knew these increases were coming?
We focused on property tax relief. In fact, we wanted to provide more relief to Montana homeowners. The legislature rejected that proposal and reduced it. We had hoped to do more structural change. We did get $120 million in permanent relief. Local property taxes are a function of local spending and voter-approved mills. None of this money comes to the state. It's a local issue, and we need to work with the legislature on permanent relief. We were pleased to get this 2-year relief in place over the next period to offset any increases most people are going to see. So they've been made whole, but again, we need to do permanent relief. I need the help of the legislature to get that done.
So the state's also being challenged by some counties for making more money from the 95 mills that run every year to pay for our education system. It's kind of a complicated question. There's been some headlines. There's a lawsuit, I believe. Those 95 mills, the counties are arguing, aren't necessary now because there's so much more taxable value. Perhaps the state could reduce those mills. And so then counties gather those 95 mills for the state. And so some are now even reducing those mills themselves, saying that the state can cover the mandated education costs that it has to with fewer mills. So I'm curious, is that the case?
Yeah, it is complicated. You're right about that. The 95 mills is court mandated. It's been the same for over 30 years. We're doing what we believe the law says we have to do. I'm a big fan of lowering taxes. That's what we did for income tax, property tax permanent relief, the business equipment tax. We should do more in this area, but we're not going to defund our public schools. And so we need the court to tell us what the law says. We believe we've acted in accordance with the statute, continuing what has been done for the last 30 years. We don't believe we have the clear statutory authority to float these 95 mills down. In the end, the difference, the 17 mills, is about $100 for an average homeowner. And it would have shifted if it stays at this lower amount. It means that large corporations are going to pay less and homeowners are going to pay more. And I don't think that's where we want to end up.
So I'm kind of curious. You're talking about you've mentioned the tax rebates, which for the next couple of years, the majority of people in the state will have their tax increase covered, and the $120 million in permanent tax reductions, which some would argue actually contribute to homeowners ultimately paying more of the burden of taxable value in the state because there aren't taxes coming in from other sources like incomes. So I'm wondering, when can people expect to see the fruit of any long-term change actually affecting their lives in the state?
Well, they're seeing it this year because...
But on a long-term basis, this is the temporary solution to a problem that just accelerated very quickly, and our system is set up so that residential property owners are paying much more of the property taxes generally in the state.
So the rebates that they're receiving this year and next, $675 this year, $675 next year, more than offsets the increase that most homeowners are going to see. We need to do permanent relief, and that can't happen until the legislature's back in session. In addition, we did $120 million of relief and got that back into their pockets. In addition,
which wasn't very much money. If somebody makes $80,000 a year, they got about $80. So that's not really a long-term solution for a systemic issue with residential property owners paying the majority of taxes in the state.
Well, property taxes are too high, Augusta, and we need to bring them down, and I need the legislature to work with me to give me these structural changes. We prioritized immediate rebates because that's what we could get done, and that's going to cover people for the next 2 years. We'll have a chance in the 2025 session, if I'm back in office, to work on permanent relief in addition to the $120 million we gave Montanans, on top of the income tax rebates we sent to Montanans, on top of the reduction in income tax rates. But again, property taxes go to the local community. They're a function of local spending and local voter-approved mills. None of that money comes to the state. People have to look locally to reduce the property taxes, and you saw here with Yellowstone County voters not approving this park issue, in part because they're sick and tired of paying property taxes that are too high.
I think it's less an issue of people wondering if an issue like the Parks Fund is something their community needs, or if it's a priority that they can afford to pay for, because it's homeowners paying the taxes. But we've got to wrap. We'll be back right after this.